Hello everybody and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Video Clips, and just a couple of announcements. We have so many exciting things going on here right now. Just one more class is left in the Cognitive Health and Alzheimer's Disease course, but I'm filming as I go, so if you missed that course and you really want to take it, you can take it online. And then next coming up, Your Amazing Microbiome, Health Benefits and Detrimental Effects of Cannabis and IBS, and Irritable Bowel Syndrome. Those are the ones, the live courses that are yet to be taught this year. And in all cases, I put these on a video platform. So I think there are 35 of them now on video that you can choose from. So we have all kinds of package opportunities. In fact, we just published a couple weeks ago the fall semester calendar. We'll be offering the diet and lifestyle course again, and there are package opportunities with that, food over medicine coaching, packages with that. You can just do packages of some of the educational courses. And if you want to make up your own package, we can do that for you too. So if you're interested in careers, you'd like to look at our nutrition educator program, which is an alternative to dietetics, send me an email. I am more than happy to spend time with you on the phone to help you sort out what it is that you're wanting to do. And if it's not something that we can help you do, we might be able to refer you to some people who can help you do it, okay? Couple of comments on YouTube that I want to talk about in a constructive way. A few weeks ago I did one on kratom, this herbal supplement that's being used for pain relief that's just as addictive as opiates are. And you know, some of you just get very, very aggravated with me and say that, well, it helped me, and a couple of you said, I'm now addicted to it, but isn't it better than being addicted to opiates? And I don't think we really know the answer to that, but here's the point that I'm getting at. You know, I think we live in a free country. Everybody should live in a free country. If you want to take this stuff, you can take this stuff. My point is that whether we're talking about an herbal supplement that you can buy at Worthington Mall, a mile and a half from here, or whether you're talking about a drug that's being recommended to you or prescribed by a medical doctor or a procedure or a screening test, all I'm saying is that people are entitled to know the risks and benefits of these things before they make a choice. And in the case of kratom, it's being grossly misrepresented by the promoters. And I don't think that doctors and drug companies should get a free pass, but I don't think that the kratom manufacturers should get a free pass either. I mean, what is the problem with just making sure that people are informed before they make these decisions? That's really the reason why I put out these videos. Another thing that some of you write me stories about, the keto diet worked for me. Well, you know, as I testified in front of the USDA committee, a lot of things work for weight loss in the short term. A lot of things will cause you to have low glucose numbers in the short term. It's the long term where this stuff becomes a problem. And storytelling is not a substitute for looking at carefully developed evidence. This always makes me laugh when some people who choose to comment call me a vegan fanatic, okay? And here it is with the vegan agenda and the whole nine yards. Okay, so first of all, I do eat a vegan diet, just for the record. But we have never taught a vegan diet here at Wellness Forum Health. So when people start talking about this organization being a bunch of vegan fanatics, obviously you don't know what you're talking about because we don't teach a vegan diet. So this goes to, sometimes it's really a good idea to be quiet until you know what you're talking about, and then you won't make an ass out of yourself when you start talking. Okay, forgive my language, but I just couldn't resist on that one. And then some of you defend some of your choices that seem to go against some of the things that I talk about, some of the things I report, by telling me that your blood test results are amazing. Well, you know, the world is full of people who have great blood work and they're dying of heart attacks. And I've always used in some of my intro workshops the case of poor Tim Russert, a well-known, well-loved anchor man who had a Sunday morning, very popular Sunday morning program, who was a multimillionaire, and he had great insurance, and gosh, that's supposed to be the thing that protects you, right, is great insurance. Everybody needs it. Great insurance. He went to all the best doctors in New York, and in fact, the best, and I would put air quotes around that, one of the best internists in New York gave him a clean bill of health 6 weeks before he had his fatal heart attack. And so I've been saying for years, I think being a dead guy with great blood work is probably not what you're trying to aspire to achieve, right? So there are limitations to what we can draw from blood test results, particularly in the short term. And then another thing that has been popping up lately, and I get a lot of emails about this, is the deficiencies that vegans are bound to encounter, particularly DHA. And so for the record, it's very important that you not infer things that have not been shown to be true. So in the case of DHA, it is true that vegans generally have lower levels of DHA than meat eaters. But that doesn't mean that there's a problem, because there is not a single study that has ever shown that a vegan with lower DHA levels is at any disadvantage in terms of intellectual development or capability or any of the other silly things that are being said as a result of that, of those lower numbers. And so I'll tell you some other things that are different about vegans. We tend to have lower BMIs, and we have higher urinary markers for cruciferous vegetables. So if you were going to take everything that tends to be different about vegans and turn it into pathology, I mean, some drug company could probably have a heyday treating all of us for the things that are wrong with us, but that would be ridiculous, right? So this idea of treating nutrient deficiencies all the time, I just laugh out loud. I remember back to one time I was at a conference that particularly catered to this type of mentality, and all these people are talking about supplements and everybody needs to take supplements, and I remember asking this physician who was sitting next to me, "Where do you practice?" She said, "Baltimore." I said, "And really, how many people have come into your office with scurvy?" Because you know how many people come in here with scurvy? 0, all right? How many people come into your office and they have beriberi? These are deficiency diseases. This is not what we're dealing with here. I mean, everybody in this field is dealing with diseases of excess. Too many calories, too much protein, too much fat, too much. It's not too little. All right, so sometimes I like to respond to some of the comments I get frequently this way, because I think they're things that are interesting to the rest of you too. And for those of you who scream at me in capital letters because I don't approve your comments, that will not help, for one thing. Clean up your language, that will help. Get rid of the capital letters, that helps a lot. Stop calling me a vegan fanatic, because that definitely does not describe me or this organization. And if you do submit studies for review, I take that seriously, but I don't approve the comments until I have time to review the study, because one of the things about this channel that is different is the material is vetted, and that's a distinct difference from what's being done in a lot of places where it's a gathering of information and the consumer sorts it out. We're sorting according to some standards that we put forth for evidence. So anyway, let's talk about opiate drugs while we're having all the happy news here. All right, so many states have filed lawsuits against drug companies that have contributed to our current epidemic of opiate addiction and the very high death rate. And one of the benefits of lawsuits is you really can take care of some bad actors. But I'll tell you another thing that's really beneficial with lawsuits is the discovery process lets you have access to a lot of documents that the bad actors, like the drug companies, wouldn't normally have any reason to disclose. But when the judge orders them to disclose these things, then they do it. So some of the information that's been produced in this way has been shocking, even to people like me who are veterans who've been talking about what bad actors are populating the drug companies and the medical field today. So drug companies, let's just start at the beginning, they have had a very powerful incentive to promote opiate drugs, and that's money. And they made a lot of it, collectively grossing about $8 billion a year until very recently. According to information released by federal judge Dan Polster here in Ohio, the companies flooded the market with 75 billion opioid pills during just one 6-year period, and actively targeted specific regions for their marketing efforts, and some of them were the poorest regions in the country, like Appalachia. At one point, this will blow your mind, the highest per capita area for opioid deliveries was Mingo County, West Virginia, where dozens of pill mills were operating and giving prescriptions to almost anybody who was willing to pay cash. According to Drug Enforcement Administration data, McKesson Corporation, Walgreens, CVS, and Walmart were responsible for a lot of the opioid drugs that were purchased by consumers. These and other companies continued to deliver ridiculous amounts of pills in spite of warnings from the DEA and a gradually and eventually alarming increase in the death rate due to overdose. These practices were economically rewarding. McKesson was a big player, and the CEO of McKesson at the time, John Hammergren, was one of the highest paid executives in the entire United States. I think he made $629 million in 1 year. So apparently criminal activity pays off really, really well, which is why people engage in criminal activity. Other companies that promoted opioid drugs, including Purdue Pharma and Johnson & Johnson, these companies were actually competing with each other, but records showed that they used the same tactics to drive sales of their products. They targeted doctors who were already identified as high prescribers. They worked together to encourage doctors to change their prescribing habits and to influence federal agencies and politicians. And the result was a massive overprescribing of opioids by hundreds of thousands of doctors that adversely affected millions of Americans and their families. Some of the strategies used by drug companies to promote sales included making false claims about the safety of opioids, misrepresenting the content of journal articles in order to support their assertion that the risk of addiction was actually less than 1%, funding their own studies, which were flawed by design, and developing physician training programs that taught doctors that the best way to treat pain was through opioid drugs, which is patently false. Once it became apparent that huge profits could be generated with opioid drugs, many companies jumped on board. For example, Mallinckrodt managed to capture over a third of the oxycodone and hydrocodone market and sold 29 billion pills by itself between 2006 and 2012. Now, this goes to some of the information that was released by judges and discovered in the discovery process, and it's amazing. One of the communications was from Victor Borelli, Mallinckrodt's national account manager, and he wrote it to Steve Cochran, a salesman at drug distributor KeySource Medical. So Borelli was notifying Cochran that a shipment of oxycodone was on the way, and Cochran responds, quote, "Keep them coming, flying out of there. It's like people are addicted to these things or something. Oh wait, people are." And Borelli writes back, "Just like Doritos, keep eating, we'll make more." I mean, it's just hard to imagine. And I've said this quite a few times lately. If you're going to engage in callous criminal behavior, don't document it in an email. I would like to think that if I was going to do this, I'd be smart enough not to put some of these comments in writing, you know? Another discovery process and another lawsuit against Purdue Pharma produced a memo by Dr. Richard Sackler, who was head of marketing and also a member of the family that owns and runs Purdue Pharma still. He blamed the patients who became addicted, writing, quote, "They get themselves addicted over and over again. They engage in it with full criminal intent. Why should they be entitled to our sympathies?" And this is just kind of amazing coming from a company that actively misrepresented. I mean, one of the best stories about all of this was the article called, well, it was referred to as an article, Porter and Jick, which was a 2-paragraph editorial in the New England Journal of Medicine that discussed giving opiate drugs in a hospital setting, and people didn't become addicted to them, which is true if you just give them in a hospital setting. But Purdue's reps, the company that this guy works for, Purdue's reps were out saying, according to a study published in the New England Journal of Medicine, Porter and Jick, opiate drugs are not addictive. So this guy and his family participate in this, and then he has the nerve to turn around and blame the victims because they were lied to and their doctors were given misinformation. I'll tell you what, it's amazing. And to date, there have been over 400,000 deaths. Now, Purdue isn't responsible for all of them, but boy, they did their part. Well, here's the $64,000 question. Why was nothing done about this when it was going on? Well, the agency that's supposed to handle drug approvals and post-approval safety studies and oversight is the Food and Drug Administration, which is paid hundreds of billions of dollars in user fees annually by the drug companies. According to Rayford Brown, head of the FDA's Opioid Advisory Committee, the FDA continues to approve opioid drugs and to put the interests of drug companies against protection instead of or ahead of American public health. Desuvia, which Brown refers to as a, quote, terrible opioid drug, was approved earlier this year and is more potent than fentanyl. All right, so you just got to wonder, what in the world would make anybody, reasonable person, think that we need a more potent version of fentanyl? Well, Brown says he's lost all confidence in the FDA's ability to do the right thing and says, quote, "The lack of insight that continues to be exhibited by the agency is in many ways willful blindness that borders on the criminal." Lots of criminals to go around. We've got criminals working in the drug companies. We've got criminals working for the federal government. Well, 4 U.S. senators agree with Brown and wrote to the FDA Chief Scott Gottlieb, urging him not to allow Desuvia to be approved. I read the letter that they wrote, and this is a quote: "This puzzling and unacceptable course of events is unfortunately reminiscent of previous FDA processes and practices that contributed to the opioid epidemic." Amazing. Well, here's the thing. The drug companies and their partners at the federal government are despicable, but no one is talking about the irresponsible doctors who prescribe these drugs. I mean, yes, the companies and their representatives lied. The Porter and Jick thing was just one example. Yes, the FDA did nothing. But the drugs were obtained by prescriptions written by medical doctors who never bothered to check it out. I mean, it's just unconscionable that somebody would believe a drug rep and not bother to check it out on their own. These doctors should be prosecuted as well because they're at least as responsible as the drug companies for the epidemic of addiction and death from opiate drugs. People who patronize the pill mills, I think most of them who went there knew that they were getting their fix from drug dealers. But a lot of these prescriptions were written by doctors in respectable settings who people thought they could trust. So I'm an advocate, I'll finish before I finish up. I want to tell you that the information that came from, that this data that came from is articles written by a guy by the name of Chris McGreal. He wrote a book called American Overdose, which, by the way, if you choose to read it, it is better than anything John Grisham ever made up, only it is unfortunately all true. And Chris will be appearing at our conference this fall. Through one of our members and yoga students, we managed to get in touch with him and have him come to speak at our conference. And I promise you it will be the most interesting Saturday night you spend this year if you come to hear this guy speak. So anyway, I'll just finish up by saying this. I really have come to the conclusion, and some of you know I don't like government. I don't want more of it, all right? But I think federal laws are needed that make health professionals liable for their behavior. Failure to investigate and understand the risks and benefits of tests, drugs, and procedures and to pass this information on to consumers should be, if you don't do that, it should be against the law and should involve criminal penalties. This is the case with transactions involving other products and services like cars and real estate and investments. And in these cases, by the way, ignorance is not a defense. You're not allowed to just claim ignorance as a defense for doing terrible things to people. At this point in time, there just isn't any incentive for doctors to behave differently, and until there is, not much will change. Now, when I talk about doctors, I'm not talking about some of you who are watching this, because there's some wonderful doctors out there, but the profession in general is really in trouble right now. And studies are showing, and I'm going to put out a video clip or an article on this probably in the next couple of weeks, that the trust level in doctors is actually worse right now than politicians. And that makes me sad because, first of all, we need doctors. We need good doctors. We need medicine in this country. So the fact that this is degenerated to this point is very disturbing to me. But in any case, there is no incentive right now for the profession as a whole to change, and it needs to happen much more quickly than can happen one doctor at a time seeing the light. So it's unfortunate that legislation is needed to make doctors behave in a responsible manner, but the profession has demonstrated for decades it's just not going to reform itself. And unfortunately, that's what happens in many, many professions. So anyway, join us in November 8th through 10th. Look online, wellnessforumhealth.com, and you can see the schedule. We have an amazing, amazing weekend planned for you, including a panel on vaccines with some advocates and parents, and we'll present a pretty balanced discussion, but I think you'll find it pretty interesting with our flavor of presentation, full information. And so anyway, that's all for today as usual. Hit the subscribe button, pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it, and I'll be back to you on Thursday with more news.